Therefore, at the beginning of the film, we observed that many of the company's employees had traveled to the sea to conduct drilling, or to dig for anything beneath the surface of the water. After a long day of work, they headed home. Magnus, Rick's manager, suddenly receives a call from the company's CEO informing him that the helicopters that were scheduled to pick you up have been diverted due to an emergency. Rick is referring to a location in the middle of the ocean with lots of ships. The call is now disconnected when Magnus asks when my staff will arrive to pick me up. When that happens, the entire location's communication system, through which they could contact anyone, also shuts down. Due to this, the doctor's call to his or her home is dropped, and Fulmer, the electrician's radio system, is unplugged. Magnus convenes a meeting and informs everyone there that the helicopters are not currently coming to take us up, which causes everyone to become quite anxious. One of them, an elderly man, keeps asking why the helicopters haven't arrived. All of the lights have just abruptly gone out. Fulmer observes that for the time being, the generator is powering a few lights, and the pressure in Rick's main AC is also fine, but if the pressure rises, everyone will perish. When Fulmer contacts the ship, he learns that the same issue is present. Now that Rick is shaking significantly, the main AC catches fire. Currently, the company's female scientific employee does not want to shut down the system because the target has not yet been reached. Magnus, however, informs the staff that there is no work to be done and that all systems need to be turned down immediately since human lives are crucial. Rick trembles once again, and now there is a dense fog covering the entire area. One of the workers now believes that the earthquake is trembling because we haven't dug too deeply, or how deep we haven't actually delved in the sea. However, the scientist replies that nothing similar does occur, so Magnus sends Fulmer and another employee, Base, up to inspect the communication system. While working, I noticed a dead bird. While Magnus and the elderly man were waiting for him to arrive, Base suddenly descends from the sky and trips. When they reach him, the scientist and doctor quickly grab the medical kit so they can treat him if he is hurt. Fulmer also descends and claims to have been standing behind me when I suddenly fell, but I have no idea what caused it. The elderly man does not accept what Fulmer claims. Base clip rope fell because it was open. Base is also brought to the medical room by the doctor, who makes an attempt to treat him before explaining that he cannot be cured without a surgery room and the necessary tools. The scientist demonstrates to Magnus that there is absolutely no pressure in the pipelines and that every rig in the region is in working order. Base awakens in the interim, starts to think, and realizes that events are occurring in two different sections of the water. The moment Magnus notices that the old man has taken the company's confidential file out of his office, he became irate. He gathers everyone in the firm and accuses them of lying to us. Meanwhile, Magnus also arrives from E, from which he must acknowledge that he is saying the truth. Because the firm is forbidding the project, all of your positions will soon be eliminated. I was just telling everyone how unusual it was, because we didn't know where the ash was coming from at the moment. Base also arrives, which was looking quite unusual, because there was no volcano nearby, which was not a volcano. He declares that the destruction has started for a while, says as much, and then collapses. As I came to my senses later, I couldn't recall saying anything about destruction or falling from the sky. He merely claims that I saw something in the fog when I first awoke, which was followed by the emergence of an odd sound in my head. The doctor starts drawing blood as a sample because he is unable to hear him, which makes him irritated. He claims that a large wave is approaching because you guys disregarded his warning and performed poorly. Yet after putting him to sleep, the doctor informs the scientist that it is unexpected that wounds are mending on their own. When Base awakens after passing away, he looks at his arms and notices that something shiny is healing his wounds. Everyone can see that their ship is attempting to make contact with them, but it is traveling in the wrong direction. Magnus sends a worker to see the message, and when they arrive they discover that the ship needs their assistance. To find out what is known about the eruption, Magnus instructs the filmmaker to send him signals using the lights. The elderly man was driving himself insane with rage because he was imprisoned inside the room, repeatedly attempting to open the door. Base observes that the lesions in the treatment area have healed. Thinks that rig is being destroyed when he looks in the mirror. He then exits E, enters the space, and dons the employee's attire. Gets a terrible headache right now, and a sleeping tooth cracks and falls out. The scientist informs RA that I don't feel well. Until I finish my investigation, everyone should remain within and not venture outside. The filmer appears and informs them that our ship's communication system has likewise failed. Also, if you wait until morning, it will hit something and fall apart. These lights need to be burned. On which the scientist claims that because of the business contract, we are unable to do so because we risk legal repercussions. Magnus responds, "We cannot lose so many lives in the name of the pact," to which I agree. "So you burn all the lights, filmmaker." Base now acts in an odd manner. He begins drawing a circle on the window. When the employee asks how I am, I reply that I have a terrible headache and am so exhausted that I have begun to feel as though I ought to have passed away in that incident. The moment the light in the room began to flicker, Base had another terrifying notion that made him want to go. Along with breaking the window, the elderly man left. An employee steals and consumes alcohol. The moment one starts to take a bath, their entire body begins to hurt. When he throws up, the tattoo's dark ink begins to leak from his body as well. Nevertheless, when the doctor's companion finally arrives and notices, the patient had already passed away. As the scientist notices him, he is confused as to why he died. Nevertheless, he realizes that all the worthless things are going out of his body when a worker gives him base wealth. The elderly man was already there when Filmer went outside with a companion to inspect the ship. Someone enters and shuts the door. Work-related hand injuries occur to filmmakers. Now that road is likewise no longer descending. The elderly man enters, goes to the control panel, and uses the lights to transmit a signal for assistance. Whose ship is currently approaching at full speed. When Filmer and his buddy noticed it, they attempted to enter, but the door was locked. Filmer starts screaming as a result. Magnus and the doctor's companion arrived in response to the voice, opened the door, and went to confront the elderly guy. When Magnus says to send a message on the ship that's heading the wrong direction rather than lying down, a worker approaches Base, who was outside, through the lights in the interim. He invites him inside, but Base declines, stating, "I want to see the aquatic monster that is doing all this." The worker approaches him at this point, grips his neck, and extracts the water from his lips. Now a worker appears and informs him that a very large layer is approaching due to the alteration in the ship's side. So, hurry inside. When Base hears this, he leaves him outside and enters the building by himself. As to the sort of an Anu artifacts, in the Anu, the scientist discovers that there are some small insects and animals in the ash when he spills blood on it. She then makes phone calls to Magnus and the doctor to inform them that an examination of the ash revealed that there are some critters, specifically insects, which are looking for a person whose body they were unable to shield and who they also incorporated. They quickly heal wounds in whoever's body they enter because spreading those insects requires a robust physique. As a result, we must avoid the ash and, like Base, we must provide protection for everyone who has physical wounds. Magnus comments that I don't feel right in Base after hearing that. Take blood samples from everyone, which we will combine with Base blood to see. Now as the smoke has started to fade, the neighboring river has been utterly obliterated. When the smoke appears, Base becomes enraged as he is studying the scientist's research papers. The scientist arrives in the interim and notices that Base has drawn blood. As soon as they ask for the sample, steal it, and flee, it becomes impossible to do the test. Magnus suggests that we check the OT wounded people as a result of T, then calls a meeting and announces that going forward, everyone will work in 2 teams. One team will thoroughly inspect the entire rig, and the other team will locate Base. The scientist learns through investigation that these tiny insects date back to the time of the dinosaurs, whose extinction coincided with that period. Yet, it appears that they have come back to life as a result of the drilling in the river. Base throws a sample of blood into the water, and the wounds are now entirely healed. The water tank is filled with tiny insects as a result of the tester's hand being placed within it. But as soon as Base's friend approaches, he swiftly runs away. As a buddy notices those tiny insects in the water, she immediately starts screaming out to the others. Base, though, tackles him and flees. As 2 workers arrive to take him up, they notice that plants have grown in place of those tiny insects. Now that Base's friend's tooth is beginning to fall out, it is also infected. It implies that anything that was E had also been influenced. He was extremely terrified because T kills a worker and flees from E. When the doctor's partner descends, they notice that Base is growing plants. Then it says that I've learned from a very old recollection that the local wildlife is being wiped out. In addition, they cannot survive if they are not saved. In the meantime, Base's friend joins him and concurs. Nevertheless, as the elderly man approaches, they both flee. Fulmer Lato is alright, but she had neglected the primary problem's fire. It had to be set on fire again for it to survive. As a result, the rig's demise is likewise confirmed. Nevertheless, the lower portion only has complete control over the main portion. But, since it is a shining object and tiny insects are TE, if you go TE, you run the risk of spreading the virus. Someone will need to climb up and light the main part on fire as a result of this. A worker then handles all of the control on his own and dispatches Fulmer to the main area. He advances, takes a great aim, and fires in the main area. But, Fulmer was seriously hurt and had to be taken to the hospital right away. We were in the lowest part, where the thoughts were growing worse and worse. He realizes that the entire rig system will need to be turned off if these little insects are to be spared. Eventually, Fulmer resumes his health and begins his investigation. But, whether intentionally or not, she duplicates Base's round circle on the copy. Everyone is summoned to the control room by Magnus. All of the rig's safety is being compromised because of Base, who is in the control room below. Because of this, the pressure exceeded its maximum level. They now send a camera gadget under the water, and they can see that the earthquake has caused several circular patterns to form on the ground, which makes Fulmer think about sketching. Now that T has occurred, a worker descends to the control room area and ends T's safety by stopping the system. Hence, Base's scheme proved unsuccessful. He becomes really irate. He restarts hacking the computer's direct system. Then again, an alarm sounds, due to which strategy was unable to succeed. A worker receives a message informing them that the communication system has been fixed. Magnus also asks for assistance by messaging the guard right away. As Fulmer looks inside those circular structures, the earthquake began to move towards the ground while the doctor was speaking to T's sister. As a result, both signals and the internet cease to function very much. Because of this, the message sent by Magnus to assist him was not received by the guard. Base tries to make touch with Fulmer's body using the power of those little insects. This causes the increase of wounds. Base's voice also begins to enter Fulmer's head at this time. Goes to the bathroom to check for wounds for this reason. Now, the scientist finds him while still seeking for him. Fulmer is surprised upon seeing T, because briefly noticed Base's shadow in the mirror. He describes all that was happening to the scientist. This provides him with relief. Now Fulmer is aware that he should leave when Base calls. After some time, the scientist goes to meet him, but, instead of seeing him, he discovers a knot that was left behind. Now that Fulmer is moving to the bottom part, the scientist and the doctor follow him as well. The bright objects and tiny insects no longer bite the doctor, but instead begin to creep about him. Observing how the scientist removes him, everyone on the rig seemed really content. A ship was approaching them from a nearby rig. The scientist first encounters the senior, who formerly worked in the research facility, after arriving at the ship. The senior enters the control room right away after arriving. The doctor examines the remaining visitors to see if there are any injuries. When a coworker realized my friend had also arrived on the same ship, she expressed her shock. Suddenly, that senior informs me that my rig was torn because of tremendous pressure. He is asked why he was sent to the rig by the scientist, but he is unable to respond. The new worker now claims that the senior sent many tools to the seafloor when he visited our rig. I was sending something else down with the tools instead of removing the oil. Then the fog arrived, and people began to vanish. Nonetheless, the senior remained as usual. It appeared as if wanting to when I looked at him. He gave little consideration to raising the pressure. Actually, I merely paid attention to it after sending the tool and the desired test. Our entire rig was destroyed as a result. But, removed all test data before the equipment was destroyed. The fact that the business was mailing both him and the business meant that it was aware of everything right away. Also, the business sent him on purpose. According to the doctor-scientist's research, the T circle represents the awareness of 5 distinct objects. And the 5th circle is one of expanding ruin, which denotes that our time is drawing to a close. The senior claims that the diseased individuals in my rig set the oil well on fire. In order to eradicate all of these dangerous insects, I want to send some people to the major portion, he continues. Magnus, however, declines and says, "No, I can't endanger my people." Also, Fulmer meets Bass and his companion. According to Bass, these insects will eventually infest my entire body. The senior informs us that in order to stop Bass, we must breathe carbon dioxide into the ventilation system below where Bass is. We will also breathe in carbon dioxide through the larger cylinders. A worker has misgivings when the senior brings the cylinders. because it stated that something else had been added to it in addition to carbon dioxide. Then he moves the cylinders down to where Bass is. The connection between the cylinder and the ventilation system is also connected. They come across Bass's friend E, who is visibly unwell and has been vomiting blood, which they interpret to mean that is dying because of the elevated carbon dioxide. Due to tea, plants are also perishing. The senior's idea was also tea. Because of this, the worker and the elderly guy flee the area while one worker stays with Bass's friend. The ventilation system is then tried to be turned off by Fulmer. Both Bud and Bass pass out. The doctor notices that the elder shut all of the bottom parts doors after the two of them left. The companion who had stopped because of Bass' pal was trapped inside due to tea. It becomes so nasty that it hurts. Everyone now approaches the senior and inquires as to why, despite the fact that doing so was risky, carbon dioxide was mixed into the ventilation system. Then claims that it is a means of surviving, not a threat. The scientist enters the bottom portion of the building to turn off the ventilation system. Fulmer was also unconscious as he lay. She makes an effort to awaken him, but he remains unconscious. Nevertheless, now that the plants are touched, Fulmer's eyes open. She regained awareness. They both then depart after that. The eyes of Bass were likewise open. She too regained consciousness. That fifth circle was now also complete. Neha Valker claims that the senior pushed the test tube to its limit in order to ruin the apparatus and kill all of the little insects. The senior then left several people to perish before joining us in a small boat. Magnus then informs the senior that it is company policy to continue drilling regardless of what occurs, which is why I was assigned by the firm to exterminate the animals and insects. Because they will spread throughout the entire world if they are not eradicated. We will also need to kill all of these sick folks in order to survive. Yet the scientist completely disagrees with T. She claims that Fulmer has a greater idea to offer us than she has. Bass believes that these insects are blocking my body's systems. A not earthquake then follows. Fulmer reaches out to Bass, which revealed that these creatures, these insects, are thoroughly cleaning the ocean. Yet, a scientist claims that because there are so many insects, destroying them will be useless. Only talking to the Bass will be able to stop them, as only those who can link with these insects may communicate. Then, when those three move to the lower area, Bass begins to sob. It's too late, my effort was unsuccessful. Everyone was aware of the senior's goals. Because of this, he says to the new employee, if you help me, I can save you and your friend from me. The employee now suspected that the senior shouldn't also damage the rig, so activates the microphone, causing everyone on the speaker to begin paying attention to the senior's remarks. The senior now activates the equipment to demolish the rig when the earthquake begins. The helicopters arrived at the same moment and began communicating with them. However, the issue arises when the elder prefers to live alone. The physician and his buddy notice him and follow him, while the new employee and their friend struggle to put an end to the explosion. Then he goes and tells everyone that although the explosion has been prevented, there will still be destruction and a wave. We must depart from here quickly. The elderly man strikes the senior hard before walking away. As the earthquake intensified, it started to emanate from the lower part. Nonetheless, Bass decides to halt E. He wants to demonstrate to these insects that there are some decent humans out there. Then, everyone who is left boards the chopper and takes off from the scene. The entire rig is then swallowed up by a tsunami. Bass is glowing with those insects, despite still being alive. The tsunami now approaches the metropolis and begins to devastate it as well, which closes the season here and sees a large number of deaths. I hope you find it enjoyable.